Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of What on Earth to Eat Now, especially to all our subscribers. If you do watch these videos and you haven't yet clicked that subscribe button, please do. It really helps us out, helps us to keep making these videos. So let's get to today's recipe. Today's recipe is perfect for a January day when it's pouring with rain and there's nothing to be done but be inside and be cozy and warm, and it makes the house smell delicious. So I'm going to start very simply with my maple syrup. So I have 225 grams here, so I'm just going to pour that into a saucepan like so. I've got 125 ml of sunflower oil. I'm going to pour that in, and I've got the same amount, 125 ml of water, and I'm going to pour that in. I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. To a bit. I'm going to add 100 grams of soft light brown sugar. One teaspoon of cinnamon. And finally, about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Go gently with the salt. So I'm just going to give that a little stir, and I'm going to put it on the heat, bring it to the boil, and then turn it off. There's really nothing more to it than that. So that came nicely to the boil, and I just turned it off, and I've preheated my oven to 180 degrees. And now, very simply, so I've got 400 grams of oats here, porridge oats, and 200 grams of my desiccated coconut. That goes in like so. I've got 60 grams of pecan nuts and 60 grams of roasted hazelnuts. I told you it was simple. Finally, I've got all my Brazil nuts, so that's 170 grams, and I'm just going to put them in like that. And then I'm just going to pour my mixture all over it. There's no knack, it just all needs to go into the bowl. Give it a good mix and make sure that everything's coated in your lovely maple syrup mixture. And that's really all there is to it. The only thing you need is to be able to be in the kitchen for a couple of hours, because you need to stir the granola every 10 minutes. So I'm just going to put this simply into my baking tray. Smells delicious, the cinnamon and the vanilla. Just going to spread it out like so. Try and get an even amount. I've got an empty vanilla pod here. This is one of the ones that I had in previous recipes when I suggested that you keep them. So that just tucked in nicely there. It'll roast with the granola, and you'll get that wonderful vanilla flavour as well as the extract that I've put in there. So I'm going to pop this in the oven now, and I'm just going to turn it every sort of 10 minutes or so. To start with, it might take a bit longer to start having a bit of colour, and then as it gets sort of drier, it'll go quicker. So one thing to bear in mind is that you want to take it a little bit less far than you'd think, because when you do take it out of the oven, the nuts will continue to get a little bit darker and more cooked, and you don't want that burnt flavour. So just keep your eye on it, and you can be certain you're going to have an absolutely delicious granola at the end. Once the granola is cooked and cooled, I'm just going to mix these ingredients with the granola, and you have the finished dish. So in here I've got 50 grams of sesame seeds, I've got the remaining 50 grams of desiccated coconut, I've got 200 grams of sour cherries. I love sour cherries in this recipe, but you don't have to stick to it. If you can't get hold of them, or you prefer something else, or you've got lots of extra dried fruit to use up, just use it as a guide. It's a really great recipe for using up odds and ends. And as long as you have the ratios fairly similar, the same amount of dried fruit to nuts to oats, and your maple syrup and sunflower oil mixture, you should be just fine. So I've got 150 grams of dried apricots that I just cut up simply with a pair of kitchen scissors. And into that I've put the remaining pecans, which is just 30 grams, and the rest of my hazelnuts, that's 130 grams. And it's very simple, all in one bowl, and that's all there is to it. just to show you, this is my first turn. It's been about 10 minutes. So you can see where it's starting to get a little bit golden. So I'm just going to turn it around. Not an exact science here. But what you're trying to do is get it to cook evenly without burning on any particular side. Especially if your oven has hot spots like ours, just keep an eye on it. It's been another 10 minutes, and I'm just going to keep doing this. To start with, it goes quite slowly, and you'll think, oh, it's never going to be that lovely golden colour, but as it starts to dry out, it will go a bit quicker, so keep your eye on the ball with this one. So it's been about an hour and 10 minutes, and you can see it's beautiful and golden, and it's quite crispy. And I'm just going to let that cool before I add the rest of the ingredients. So I've let my granola get completely cold, and I'm going to add in the rest of the dried fruit. Beautiful, luxurious granola. So I've got my beautiful granola here, and I'm going to serve it with some plant-based yogurt. I've got a coconut yogurt here, and some apples that I roasted simply with sugar and vanilla. Perfect remedy to banish the January blues and jazz up any breakfast. And just so simple. Et voila, your homemade sour cherry granola. Perfect for banishing those January blues. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of What on Earth to Eat Now. I do hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll see you again next week for another episode of What on Earth to Eat Now. I'm just going to have to tuck right in. Mmm.